Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
We are talking about elections in Iran today, and I know that a lot of you would say instinctively, why should we bother about elections in Iran? What kind of elections in Iran? Is it a democracy? Because it's a theocracy, the supreme leader is an Ayatollah, he controls everything, all of that is true. But underneath that, it's also a democracy. It has a tightly contested, usually with Iranian characteristics, election, and the chief executive, at least for the world, becomes the president. The president obviously works under the supreme leader, who then clears every decision, who vetoes anything that he wants. Nothing is done without the supreme leader. But there is an elected government. So that election is taking place this week, this Friday, and the results will be out soon. And it does look like pretty much that the Ayatollah has decided who he wishes should win. That's the reason I said there is an election, there is a democracy, but it's a democracy and election with Iranian characteristics. Now, before we go there, let me also raise two provocative questions with you. One, is there a contradiction between Islam and democracy? Once again, if you just took a poll in a street, people will say yes. Why? Because a lot of the times the Islamic countries you hear about are either not democracies, autocracies, or theocracies, or military rules, or they are hybrid democracies, as say Pakistan. No democracy is perfect, not even India's, but hybrid democracy like say Pakistan's. Now, I can give you the counter view to that. The counter view to that is that some of the more populous, some of the most populous Islamic countries are actually robust democracies. So the country with the largest Muslim population in the world, that is Indonesia, is a robust democracy. Not only is it a good, strong democracy with its flaws, there is no such thing as a perfect democracy. There is no such thing as a perfect anything. Maybe unless it's Virat Kohli cover driving on a good day. So Indonesia, with a Muslim population of nearly 27 crores, which is by far the highest Muslim population in the world, although Pakistan's tried to catch up given what their growth rate is, has a democracy index rank which at this point is marginally, very marginally higher than India's. So at this point, Indonesia's rank is 6.84 on the democracy index. India in comparison is 6.61, so marginally higher, 0.23%, but higher than India. So don't say that there is a contradiction between Islam and democracy. Other populous countries, Bangladesh doesn't have a bad index, 5.88. Now Bangladesh has many imperfections in its democracy, but it is not a country run by the army. It does not have a hybrid rule in that sense, in the sense that say Pakistan might have. Again, Albania in Europe, a Muslim country, Albania has a very high ranking of 5.89. In fact, just marginally 0.01% higher than Bangladesh is. And then we have Pakistan next door, not doing that well, but Pakistan is a hybrid democracy. So first of all, when these populous countries, Muslim countries, can have democracy, there is no contradiction between Islam, the religion, and democracy. Where is the problem then? Why do we find so few Muslim countries which have democracies or systems that not we in India, but system that the modern world describes as democracies? Equal right of vote, equality, a constitutional state, religion doesn't decide what will be done on any given day, etc., etc. So which is where I'm bringing my second provocative question, and I will read to you a list of 15 countries, and I will read to you without telling you what this list is about, although you will guess, but I will then explain to you. So these countries are then: number 1, Venezuela; number 2, Saudi Arabia; number 3, Canada; number 4, Iran, the country we are talking about in some detail today; number 5, Iraq; Russia at 6, Kuwait at 7, UAE at 8. Do I sound like one of those Tambola announcers? US at 9, Libya at 10, Nigeria at 11, Kazakhstan at 12, China at 13, Qatar at 14, Brazil at 15. So what ranking is this? This is the ranking 1 to the 15. This is the 1 to the 15 ranking of the countries that own oil reserves. At 15 topmost oil reserve owning countries in the world. Only 3 are democracies: US, Canada and Brazil. Now some others have the pretense of being democracies: Iran, Iraq now. There is also Venezuela, but these are really autocracies. Now, so what is the connection? Connection is not Islam or democracy. Connection is resources and democracy. So these are countries who suffer from resource curse. Resource curse means when you have so much of free resource available, which the regime of the day can then just pick up and distribute to people, buy up their loyalty, buy up those who might be wanting to question them, or get rid of those any which way, those who insist on questioning them, because you will have the rest on your side. Then you get a classical resource funded autocratic system. If Saudi Arabia did not have these oil reserves, could the Saudi regime be able to function as they do right now? If any of the other countries, you can look at UAE, you can look at Russia, Libya, Nigeria, Kazakhstan, if these resources were not there, and resources are not just oil, resources can be other minerals as well. So once again, juxtapose one with the other, you will find that Islamic countries which have resources, essentially oil, they tend to have poorer democracies or autocracies. But Islamic nations that have large populations but do not have this resource curse, especially resource curse of oil, they tend to be democracies. So once again, don't look for the easy answer. It's a good question to ask. Why do so few Muslim countries have democracy? But the answer is not the religion. Answer is the availability of cheap, free resources that a ruler, a sultan, a leader, a supremo, a supreme leader, a dictator, anybody can pick up and distribute among his or her people to buy up their loyalties. And finally, while we are debating what undermines democracy more, is it religion or is it resources, let me mention Venezuela. Now, you can't blame Islam for the mess in Venezuela. You cannot even blame Christianity because it is not a theocratic country. On the other hand, think, could Hugo Chavez have run the kind of regime and the government he ran in the name of democracy and ruin his country's economy, ruin his country's society, leave it in a complete rotten mess if his country did not give him the gift of the largest oil reserves in the world? Now, in this situation, one of these hybrid democracies is also Iran. Now, we like to call Pakistan a hybrid democracy. Pakistan is hybrid democracy in the sense that the army chief, the ISI, they control the key levers of power and they control the levers to the key decisions, that is India policy, America policy, nuclear policy, China, foreign policy, Kashmir and some other things. Otherwise, they let a government be elected. So the last dictator, that means a soldier who became a dictator in Pakistan, was Musharraf. That was more than 20 years ago. In fact, in 1999, 22 years ago, he took over. After that, the Pakistani armed forces discovered that you don't have to take power and get all this opprobrium because you don't even have, the only resource Pakistan has is its geography, but there is a limit to how much you can leverage your geography. It is not of the same level as, say, Saudi Arabia with its oil reserves and also its holy places and the custodianship of the Muslim holy places. So Pakistan does not have the same leverage. So the best thing is leave power to an elected government, but you pull the strings from behind the scenes, and everybody knows that Imran Khan today in Pakistan, in fact, if you find so many commentators, experts in Pakistan and outside call Imran Khan a selected prime minister because he was selected by the powers that be. They made sure all the others were out of the way. They made sure there were corruption cases against all the others. Some were jailed, some were exiled. In the past, some have been killed or some have been threatened with death. So you find that most of the rivals either wasted away or disappeared or are now hiding overseas. So that is how the third umpire controls the match. What happens in Iran, on the other hand, is more formalized. Iran does not even need the pretense of an elected democracy and a hands-off armed forces, because in Iran, power is actually not with the armed forces or with the elected government. It is with the supreme leader, who is the kind of clerical head, theocratic head of the country. So Iran system is the supreme leader, then the Guardian Council. Of the Guardian Council's 12 members, 6 are nominated by the supreme leader. The remaining 6 are nominated by the head of the judiciary. The head of the judiciary, I was trying to tell you this with a straight face, but I cannot. I'm not such a good actor. The head of the judiciary is somebody who is appointed by the supreme leader. So supreme leader appoints 6 members of this powerful Guardian Council, which sits next to him. So supreme leader, then the Guardian Council, then the president, and then the Majlis, which is the elected parliament. So 12 members of the Guardian Council, 6 nominated directly by the supreme leader, 6 nominated by, suppose we say, Chief Justice of Iran, CJI, Chief Justice of Iran. But that CJI is nominated also by the supreme leader. So Guardian Council, for all practical purposes, and formally so also, is selected by the supreme leader. Now, who is the head of that judiciary right now? So the Chief Justice of Iran today is Ebrahim Raisi, handpicked by the supreme leader. He is now contesting. He is the front runner in this election. Obviously, he's the one that the supreme leader, which is Ayatollah Khamenei, he wants Raisi to win. Many of the candidates who dare to say that they will contest against him, they have been disqualified by the Guardian Council. So who appoints the Guardian Council? I just told you. So this field was fixed to begin with. So many of those who wanted to contest against Raisi, they were told not to because they were disqualified. Among those that the Guardian Council disqualified were 2 candidates of substance, 2 candidates more modern, who could have given the Ayatollah's candidate some bit of, at least a semblance of a challenge. And these were the first Vice President Ishaq Jahangiri and also the former Parliament Speaker Ali Larijani, who's a well-known personality across the world because he's been traveling around the world besides the Foreign Minister Zarif to put forward Iran's case. So both were disqualified by the Guardian Council. Guardian Council then allowed 6 others to contest. Of the 6 also, now 3 have dropped out, and generally they've given their support to Mr. Raisi. Now what happens in the Iranian election is it's a 2-stage election. In the first stage, the winning candidate has to have a minimum number of votes. If he does not get that minimum number of votes, then there is a runoff election between the top 2. Now usually this election is settled very quickly because everybody knows who the Ayatollah wants should be winning, who the supreme leader wants should be winning. And Iran has only had 2 supreme leaders as yet, Ayatollah Khomeini and now Khamenei. But this can sometimes go wrong. For example, in 2005, that is one example where the first phase became so close that the preferred candidate of the clergy or the supreme leader did not get enough votes, and there was a runoff. In that runoff, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad defeated the clergy's candidate, who was a sitting president, Rafsanjani. So Rafsanjani got defeated like that in 2005, and Ahmadinejad was seen as a reformer. How much reform you can do with the big bosses sitting on top of you is a different issue. But it's not as if it's a government that's completely powerless or has no say or has no leverage either. So Khamenei now does not want to take that chance. He's seen that go wrong once, so this time he's made sure that anybody who looks like a challenge goes away, and that's precisely what's being done. That's why the general presumption is that unless there is a remarkable surprise of the 2005 kind, then the clergy's candidate, that is Mr. Ibrahim Raisi, would win. Now, if at all there is to be a surprise, who will do it? This surprise, if at all, will come from somebody who is not so conservative, because the other remaining candidates also are quite conservative. And this somebody is Abdul Nasir Hemati. Abdul Nasir Hemati is the governor of what is the equivalent of Reserve Bank of India in Iran. So the central bank governor. He is modern, he is into economy, commerce, he wants Iran's economy to grow. He is happy to meet Biden, he is happy to revive contacts with the Western world. He's the cat. If the Western world had a vote, in fact, a lot of the rest of the world had a vote, including, say, not just the Western world in Israel, but also, say, Arab countries. They would prefer to see him in power because he'll be seen as more open to negotiation and more open to wanting to open up Iran. That is not the case with others. But at this point, it looks like a long shot. He's quite far behind, although, mind you, if I read the media on Iran, it's quite tricky because in some opinion polls he was actually ahead of the clergy's candidate, Mr. Raisi, and then it so happens that there was an opinion poll just before their presidential debate, election debate, in which Mr. Hemati was ahead at 55%, and just a few minutes before the debate they changed something, maybe they changed some software, who knows, and it made it look like Mr. Raisi was ahead. So that again gives you an idea that whatever happens, finally the big bosses will do their best to make sure that it is only their candidate who wins. Now, Iran has had a very interesting history, as we know. We know the history of the revolution, 1979, the return of Ayatollah Khomeini from Paris. He came back and then he called for a referendum, and referendum was on a very simple question: Islamic State, Islamic Republic, yes or no. So you weren't given any other choice. Now, some people tried to protest saying that there is not enough choice, but they were shooed away, they were laughed away. So Islamic Republic, yes or no, 98% voted in favor of the Islamic Republic. So he then ushered in one constitution in 1979, which went through some modifications or amendments later. One of the amendments were also made to ensure that Khamenei succeeded Khomeini. Someone else did not come in because Khomeini's successor apparent or heir apparent was a man called Hussein Ali Montazeri. Now, Montazeri and Khomeini had a falling out because Montazeri was more liberal. He did not like the use of so much violence, victimization, killings, jailing of their political opponents. So he was sidelined, sort of demoted, and Khamenei, who had not yet qualified to become an Ayatollah, because to be supreme leader you have to be an Ayatollah, but an amendment was made and he was then sort of jacked up and made qualified enough to be the successor, and that's how he became the successor. After that, Iran's had many presidents. I mean, in fact, if you look at the list of Iran's presidents, many of these are names that we remember from our headlines. Going right back, there's Bani Sadr in 1881, Muhammad Ali Rajai, Khamenei, Akbar Hashmi, Muhammad Khatami, Ahmadinejad, Hassan Rouhani, and now you are going to see a new president in Iran. Now, what difference would it make? Now, there is a lot of speculation in global media, including a lot of speculation among those who deal with speculation in crude oil, that if you get a more moderate leader, then it is more likely that Iran will go back into JCPOA, that is their deal with the Americans and the Western countries, European countries. European countries have come back to the deal, they've reinstated the deal, but the big one between Iran and Biden is yet to be done. So if that deal is done, then sanctions will go and Iran will start producing more and more oil, and that will be good for those in the world like India who import their oil, who buy their oil. It will not be so good for those who produce oil because oil prices will come down. But if a hardliner comes in, which seems likely, then sanctions will continue for longer and then it's likely that oil prices will stay high or even go higher. And there are many other calculations. European countries have issues with Iran. They haven't quite boycotted Iran as much as Americans would have wanted them to do, particularly as Trump would have wanted them to do, but they have a peculiar problem. And that peculiar problem is a lot of European nationals of Iranian extraction are in Iranian prisons because Iran does not recognize dual nationalities. So they want them freed. Again, they think that if it's a more forward-looking, more internationalist president, that may change, but otherwise it'll remain the same or may even get worse. Behind all this, however, we know that the show will be run by the supreme leader himself, who combines the dual power of religion as well as political power. So to explain this, I can do no better than quote from my friend Bobby Ghosh's marvelous article on Bloomberg that we published on the print yesterday. In fact, I'm sharing a link with you. Please read that. And he says what happens in Iran by way of elections is like a scene from Shah Selim Bazi. So Shah Selim Bazi, he says, is a kind of puppet show in Iran, traditional puppet show, where puppets play on the stage, but there's somebody behind the curtain who's, as usual, pulling the strings. That somebody is called Murshid. Murshid is also a religious figure. So that is precisely what's happening in Iran's politics right now. People who are contesting, voting, etc., they are all puppets. The person pulling the strings from behind is making the puppets perform, but it also is selling propaganda to those who are watching. So once again, watch the results of the election in Iran. These will be significant, but always keep this in mind, that the gentleman who has controlled every president and every government in Iran for the past 3 decades is still the supreme leader of Iran. So ultimately, whatever he wishes will happen.